When my body broke, I was sitting down.
When my body broke, I was standing up.
It was an ordinary evening, really.
It was an ordinary day, really.
We had just finished a late dinner. I'd had a bit too much wine, I suppose, but Peter doesn't drink, so he was always the one to drive. The restaurant was winding down. Peter was ready to go home and go to bed. The candles and the wine were making me feel warm and romantic. I wanted to take a moonlight drive around the lake.
I was sitting at a coffee shop reading a book. It was very quiet in there, with just a few people sitting around doing what I was doing, tapping away on their laptops or having quiet conversations. Every now and then you could hear the hiss of the espresso machine or the sound of ice jiggling in a glass. It was the kind of still and quiet day that I liked. The kind of still and quiet day that I had almost every day, I guess.
So we got in the car and drove. It was such a beautiful night with the moon shining through the clouds. Everything looked so soft and harmless. The car would go up and down these small hills. You know that giddy feeling you get in your stomach when you go up and down? Like a roller coaster. I love that feeling. I reached for Peter's hand, and the last thing I remember is the way it felt as he stroked my palm with his thumb.
The sounds of shouting started to creep into the coffee shop. I looked out the window, but I didn't see anything unusual. The shouting was happening in a kind of rhythm, like a chant of some sort. It got louder and louder, and suddenly it was all around, echoing in the street. And then people began streaming in front of the window, gripping posters and banners, pumping their arms in the air, clapping their hands. A protest against the government, it turned out.
Well, no, the last thing I remember is the bright light that suddenly shot through my window, and then the moon vanished.
My first thought was, well, good for them, but I'm not a marcher. That just isn't how I deal with the world. And I went back to reading my book.
When I opened my eyes, I had no idea where I was, but the pain was so intense that it jolted me into the present. Hospital. I was laying in a bed in a hospital. They would later tell me that a car had run through a stop sign and had smashed right into the passenger side of our car. So Peter was mostly unharmed, except for some minor fractures and bruises. I had a broken arm and ribs and femur, some internal damage. They told me I was lucky to be alive. Yeah, I didn't feel so lucky.
As I sat there, I found I couldn't focus on my book. It felt silly, it felt wrong. I started to think about my still and quiet days, all those hours spent sitting alone in a coffee shop reading a book. I started thinking about why I deal with the world the way that I do. It wasn't the first time I'd thought about this, but now I was staring out the window and watching the world go by, and it struck me in a different way.
I laid in that hospital bed for weeks. For the first part, it was in and out of consciousness, and when I was conscious, I wanted to be unconscious. The pain was terrible, yes, but the worst part was staring out the window and thinking about everything out there that I was no longer going to be able to do. I was thinking, would the pain ever go away? Would I ever be able to walk normally? Would I be able to enjoy a moonlit drive around the lake ever again?
I started thinking about all the ways that I've been told to sit down, all the ways I've been told to be a good girl and watch my mouth and sit with my legs crossed and behave. How my body should look, how my body should feel, how my body should behave. And I looked down at my book, and it just seemed to dangle in my hands like this utterly useless thing. And I wondered if I had become the same thing.
It was the physical therapy that almost killed me. I had never worked so hard to achieve so little. It took me weeks to lift my arm. It took months to walk on my own 2 feet. All the simple things that my body used to do without even thinking. Now I had to think about every little thing. It was as if my body were no longer mine. It was no longer my friend. It was this thing that I had to fight every minute of every day for months. There were days when I hated my body for the way it had betrayed me. I was doing my best to make it better. And sometimes it felt like it just wasn't interested in doing anything but making me.
I don't know how one thing leads to another, but without thinking, I tucked my book into my bag and got up and joined the march. I didn't know what to do with my body at first, with my hands or my mouth. I felt embarrassed, like I didn't belong, like I was trying to be someone I wasn't. But being there with everyone else, I found some courage. And I started to shout, and I started to scream, and I started to pump my fist in the air. I started to feel like I was inhabiting a different body, a body that was standing up for something. And in my own private way, I felt like I was standing up for myself. It felt like the first time I'd ever done that.
I used to go rock climbing, It's how I met Peter, actually. There was something about the challenge of climbing up the face of a rock that I loved. It was a physical challenge, of course. Every muscle had to learn to do the right thing at the right time. Your foot had to find the right place. Your hand had to find the right place. And between the two, your whole body had to exert itself in just the right way to keep your balance and to keep climbing. All the muscles had to work together. They had to speak to each other and listen to each other.
When I was young, I went to ballet school. My parents thought it was a sort of proper and feminine way for a girl to get exercise and learn how to control her body. It was all about the line, all about the beauty, all about the excruciating physical training. The ballet teacher would come in with her stick and poke at our bodies. I remember once she came in and poked me in my waist and told me that it looked like I'd eaten ice cream the night before. I never felt so small and shrunken as when I entered that studio.
But rock climbing is also a mental challenge because you have to concentrate. You have to tune out the fear of plunging into the abyss. You have to trust your body. You have to remove doubt. You have to remove fear. And during the most horrible moments during my recovery from the accident, I tried to remember this. I tried to remember what my body could do, and I had to believe that my body could do it again. I had to know that my body was still there inside all those broken bits, all those parts that were scared. I was screaming because my body was screaming because it needed my help.
I tried for years to forget the terror of ballet school. I'd always thought that it had ruined me in some way, made me hate my body, made me hate how I looked in the mirror, made me hate having people look at me. It had burrowed into my brain and taught me to follow the rules. It's no wonder I like to sit in coffee shops and read books and stay hidden away from the world. But the strange thing was that I thought about ballet when I was marching. I was standing so straight and I felt like I was moving with such grace and power. Ballet had taught me how that feels. And here I was using that lesson to break the rules that I'd always followed.
And with time, my body got better. I got better. I can walk. I can do all the things I used to do. I can even climb rocks. My body remembered. My body remembered everything.
I still go to coffee shops. I still read books. But I do more things. I stand up for the things that matter to me. I speak my mind. My body taught me that. My body taught me to misbehave.
When I was in the hospital, the morning light would stream into the window through the blinds and dapple the whole room. I hadn't appreciated it then, that warm, healing light. But I think of it now as a kind of message that I would get through it, body and all.
During that march, we passed these tall iron gates. They were like a symbol of the power to control. But the sunlight came right through the bars, spreading this amazing golden light over the whole crowd. It makes me think that our bodies aren't prisons. They're made to let the light through. And that's what happened
That's what happened
when my body
when
broke.
my body broke.